I was not supposed to care what happened that night. I had come to Whitmore Park for one reason only, to sign the land agreement that Lord Holloway had been delaying for 3 months. A contract ball, his wife had called it, as though dressing a business transaction in chandeliers and champagne could make it something beautiful. I planned to sign the document, accept a glass of something tolerable, and leave before the dancing began. I had no interest in the spectacle of London society congratulating itself. And then I saw her standing at the far end of the room, and everything changed. She was not dressed to be noticed. That was the first thing. Every other woman in Lord Holloway's gallery wore silks that caught the candlelight like mirrors, amber, rose, cream-threaded with gold. She wore pale grey, modest and well-made, but nothing fashionable. The kind of gown a woman chooses when she has been told, too many times, not to draw attention to herself. Her hair was pinned simply at the nape of her neck, with 2 strands loose at her temples. She stood very straight. She was smiling at something her companion said, but the smile did not reach her eyes, and I, who had spent 20 years reading Rooms for Danger, knew immediately that she was managing something difficult beneath that composed surface. I asked the man nearest me who she was. "Miss Maren Ashford," he said. "Here for the betrothal signing. Fenwick's intended." I looked at Fenwick, a pink, prosperous man of 40 holding court near the fireplace, and I felt something I had no name for yet. The signing was to take place at 9 o'clock. Holloway had set a small table near the center of the gallery draped in green baize, with the betrothal contract laid out and weighted at the corners. There were perhaps 200 guests in the room. The orchestra had paused. Everyone turned to watch. Maren Ashford walked to the table alone. Her chin was level. Her hands were still at her sides. I noticed that her right thumb moved once against her skirt, the only betrayal of nerves, and then stilled. Fenwick did not come to stand beside her. He stood at the fireplace, and he cleared his throat, and he said, in a voice that carried beautifully across the silent gallery, that he had given the matter considerable thought and had concluded the match was not advantageous to either party, and that he intended to withdraw from the contract as of this evening. Someone near me drew a sharp breath. A woman laughed, a single, quickly smothered note. 100 faces turned toward Maren Ashford. She did not flinch. That was what struck me first. She did not flinch. She looked at Fenwick for exactly 3 seconds, and then she looked at the table, and I watched her make a decision. She picked up the quill that had been placed beside the contract. She set it down again, carefully, as though it were something that belonged to someone else now. She smoothed the sleeve of her grey gown. She lifted her eyes to the room. There was no pleading in her face, no tears. There was only a quiet that was so absolute, so unmoved by the 200 people staring at her, that it silenced even the whispers. I had been standing near the window at the far edge of the gallery. I do not fully understand, even now, what moved me. I am the Duke of Ravenscroft. I do not involve myself in other men's contracts, other families' arrangements, other evenings that have nothing to do with me. I have spent my entire adult life making certain that I am beholden to no one and surprised by nothing. I have been called ruthless, and I have not disagreed. I have been called cold, and I have accepted it as accurate. But I was watching Maren Ashford stand in front of 200 people who were deciding what to do with her humiliation, and she was not asking a single one of them for anything, and I thought, there is no one in this room worth half of her. I set my glass down on the windowsill. I walked across the gallery floor. The crowd parted. They always part for me. I have long since ceased to notice it. But this time I was grateful for it, because I needed to reach her before Holloway's wife moved in with her practiced consolations, before someone steered Maren toward a side room where she could be hidden away and forgotten. I stopped at the table. Maren Ashford looked up at me. She was not afraid. That was the second thing I noticed about her, the thing that mattered. She looked at me with those steady grey eyes, and she waited, and she did not perform gratitude she did not feel, and she did not pretend she knew what I was doing. She simply waited. "Miss Ashford," I said, "my name is Ravenscroft." "I know who you are, Your Grace," she said. Her voice was entirely steady. I have a proposal, I said, if you will hear it. You may speak, she said, as though she were granting me an audience in her own drawing room, as though she were the one with all the cards, and I cannot tell you why, but that undid me more than anything else. I am in need of a wife, I said. It was not how I had planned to begin, but I had not planned any of this, and so I went on. I have avoided the matter for some years. I find society's methods for arranging such things. I gestured briefly at the green baize table, at the retreating form of Fenwick, distasteful. I find most of what passes for eligible society equally so. I had not expected to find a woman I respected. The room was entirely silent. I am not offering a contract, I said. I am asking you a question. Maren Ashford looked at me for a long moment. I could not tell what she was thinking. She had the most remarkable face, not in the conventional sense, not a face the gossip sheets would draw, but a face that showed you it was thinking, and showed you nothing else until it chose to. What is the question, Your Grace? She said. Will you consider allowing me to court you? I said. In the ordinary way, over an appropriate period of time, with no contracts and no green baize, and decide for yourself whether I am worth the trouble. Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but a kind of precise reassessment, the way a careful woman recalibrates when a situation changes faster than she prepared for. You are asking me this, she said, in front of 200 people. I am aware of that. Is that intentional? Yes, I said. I wanted them to see it. I heard Fenwick say something to the man beside him, something quick and low, and I did not look at him. I kept my eyes on Maren Ashford. You should know, she said, that I am not grateful, Your Grace. I will not be grateful for this, and I will not pretend otherwise. I will not take a better arrangement simply because a worse one has just failed. I will decide on my own terms. I would expect nothing less, I said. She held my gaze for another 3 seconds. She seemed to measure things in those quiet 3-second intervals, and I was already learning to wait for them. Then I will consider it, she said, on my own terms. I bowed. She gave a small, unreadable nod. I turned to face the room. 200 people looked back at me. Fenwick was somewhere in there, gone very still. Holloway's wife had a hand to her mouth. 3 women who had been whispering near the punch bowl were no longer whispering. The evening may continue, I said, and I offered Maren Ashford my arm. After a moment she took it. We did not speak for the first half of the room. The crowd eased back to let us pass, and the orchestra recovered itself and began something low and gracious, and I was acutely aware of the warmth of her hand through my sleeve and the precise, unhurried pace at which she walked, not rushed, not leaning on me, perfectly composed. You are not what I expected, she said, when we reached the quieter end of the gallery near the tall windows. What did you expect? Someone who wanted something from me. The gesture always means something is wanted. I want to know you, I said. That is all I can honestly claim at this moment. She considered that. That is an honest answer, she said. I will give you one in return. I did not weep in front of them. I will not weep in front of you either. But I am angry, and I intend to stay angry for a reasonable amount of time, and I will not be hurried out of it. You are entitled to every hour of it, I said. Good, she said, and she looked out the window at the dark park below, and I stood beside her, and neither of us felt the need to fill the silence. That was the night I understood what it meant to meet someone your equal. Not a reflection, not a woman who agreed with me, or softened me, or waited for my lead. An equal. Someone who stood in the ruin of a public humiliation and refused to be diminished by it, and refused to be rescued from it by anything less than the truth. I courted her for 4 months. She was difficult and clear-eyed and occasionally infuriating and entirely herself at every moment, and I did not once wish she were otherwise. She said yes on a Tuesday afternoon in the library at Ravenscroft, with no audience and no ceremony, and she said it as though she had reached a conclusion after a thorough review of the evidence, which I understood was her highest form of devotion. I have never forgotten the woman I saw standing at that green baize table, absolutely still, with 200 people staring at her, choosing to be unbreakable. She made the same choice every day after that. It was the finest thing I have ever been allowed to witness.